a U.S.-based pilot operating only in the U.S. airspace. I took advantage of why up in the Ottawa area to do an intro to Canada, operating VFR and various airspace, as well as some of the phraseology that you could use while operating in that airspace. And you're looking at the Ottawa area TAC chart, terminal area chart. That's would like to thank flightplan.com that they put them free in their flight plan app, Go app. But what you're looking at here is this is Ottawa International. We actually took off from Rockcliffe Airport, which is located right there. We headed west out to the Gatineau River, headed northwest up to the Chelsea Dam, east over to Breckenridge, and then southeast down to remaining south of Duchesne's Quarry, over this Champlain Bridge. We headed east, south of the Ottawa downtown area, but then north of Ottawa International. Then over to a town called Orleans, and up to the Gatineau Airport. Did a touch and go there, and then back to Rockcliffe. So, as you can see, this was a good introductory flight, operating in 3-4 different types of airspace. And again, getting an introduction to VFR operations in those airspaces, as well as some of the respective phraseology. So I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Okay, here we are taking off to the west off of runway 27, climbing up to 2,500 feet, approaching the Gatineau River. And approaching the Gatineau River, we take a right-hand turn up to the north. And here's a nice look at the hall, which is just on the west side of Gatineau. And my instructor, who is pointing out the Chelsea Dam area and some other things that I will review now. So flipping back to the Canadian TAC chart for the Ottawa area, we'll zoom in on the airspace that's surrounding the Rockcliffe Airport. And while operating the Rockcliffe Airport, we're operating around this blue hatched, which I'm highlighting here, around the Rockcliffe Airport, so you can clearly see it. So that is the airspace while taking off in Rockcliffe, and that airspace is defined by this blue box. Blue box has an arrow that denotes that airspace, and at first looking at this blue box was a little bit confusing, but basically from 1,500 feet to 2,500 feet, you're in echo airspace, and that really no contact with the facility is needed. From 2,500 to 3,000, I first wondered why they even drew this out, because again, there's no contact that's needed there. But what the reason they have that is basically it's echo airspace, but they call out the need for a mode C transponder. So this will seem a little ancient for the ones that are operating in the States with ADS-B, and transponders are really kind of a way of life. And above 3,000, we'll talk about that in the future, but basically you would be talking to Ottawa Terminal, not Ottawa Approach, but Ottawa Terminal on 127.7 from 3,000 and above. So while operating in that blue hatched area, you'd be talking and making position reports on 123.5. You will see it labeled as a Unicom, something that should be familiar to us in the States. So basically, as we took off to the west, to the Gatineau River and up to the Chelsea Dam, we were making position reports on 123.5. Since we were climbing up to 2,500 feet, we're clearly in the no contact area. As you can see over the aircraft nose there, Chelsea Dam, by the difference in water levels, it's a working dam. But as we approach that reporting point, just like in the States, we would just self-announce that we were over the Chelsea Dam, doing the standard procedure that you're used to in the States. And looking over here, this is Camp Fortune, a little small ski resort in the town of Lac-Meech. So here we are heading to the west and approaching Camp Fortune. And as we approach Camp Fortune, this will be a good time for me to review this training airspace that we're now currently operating in. So we're back on the Ottawa TAC chart here. Again, we're over Camp Fortune, heading over to Breckenridge. And the airspace that we're really operating in here is defined by the Ottawa VOR, and then around this gray zero. And since we're at 2,500 feet, here is the airspace call out. Really no contact. We're in E. We're on a transponder, so we are good. But the one thing, there's actually kind of a very big area around here, but one thing we were self-announcing on the 123.35, they had a training aircraft, and we're monitoring and just doing self-announcements using standard phraseology of call sign and kind of where we're at. And this is the left turn to head to the southeast following the Ottawa River. So once we made the turn from Breckenridge, following the river here to the southeast, we got up with Ottawa Terminal 127.7. The phraseology was fairly standard, substituting terminal instead of approach, so Ottawa Terminal, then your call sign. And then they came back with a squawk ident, and they say that all together. Squawk ident, the code, implying to squawk that and to ident. And on the left side, you can start to see the quarry visual point. As you can start to see the road here, and we're on our way to Champlain. I should say Champlain Bridge, where and off the left-hand side of the nose, you can start to see the Champlain Bridge. This is our Ottawa Terminal. Handed us off to Ottawa Tower on the north end and asked us to start to commence our city tour. So at the left-hand side of the aircraft, you can see the downtown Ottawa area, Ottawa River to the north. Some of the bridges connecting Ottawa over to Gatineau. Leaving the Ottawa downtown area, we were proceeding eastbound. Ottawa Tower handed us over to Ottawa Terminal. And then Ottawa Terminal, as we were heading to Orleans, handed us off to Gatineau Radio. So while we're heading over to Gatineau, probably a good time to review the VFR arrival procedures. To do that in the flightplan.com or Flightplan Go app. Again, it's really nice to have the Canadian Flight Supplement. That would be the equivalent to our AFD, Airport Facility Directory, that green book, for folks that remember that. But by opening, we open up the Canadian Flight Supplement here, and you can see the Gatineau terminal, our Gatineau VFR waypoints here. So Chelsea Dam, things that we were flying over, Orleans, Champlain Bridge, and so it all starts with a V Victor. This would be very similar to our VP, our Victor Papa VFR waypoints. But going through here, this is definitely something you want to spend a little bit of time with. The most important areas I will highlight for the operation is down here. You can see that the COM is the communication, the frequency, so Gatineau Radio. P stands for procedure, and that's where I call out right-hand circuits for runway 2. So they use their phraseology as circuit. So we use patterns. They use circuits, both in their printed material here as well as phraseology on the radio. And the one thing that I wanted to call out here is the airspace and the caution. So inbound traffic should contact the Gatineau radio 5 minutes prior to entering the MF zone, and that stands for mandatory frequency. So they want you on that radio. It's not optional. And here's that Gatineau airspace, and I'll just quickly call that out so you can see it here. So basically this blue dotted line around Gatineau Airport. is that airspace, and you can see here the box that denotes that. So from 700 AGL up to 2500, they want you on the radio the frequency Gatineau radio 122.3. They call it out as echo, and then above that would be the Ottawa Terminal Airspace. So there is technically a little bit of a VFR flyaway here, where if you could stay below 700 AGL, you wouldn't have to talk to Gatineau radio, the mandatory frequency. So here we are approaching Gatineau Airport from the south, and this will be a good time to review the VFR circuit entry procedures. So this is a diagram that my instructor put up on the whiteboard here. Just to orient you here, you can see this is Gatineau Airport with a field elevation of 200. As we noted earlier, it had right-hand circuits, so we fly that circuit at 1,200 feet. That should look familiar to you. And since we are entering from the south, we're basically this red airplane. So the standard procedure in this case is to fly over the field at 1,200 feet at the midpoint of the runway, and enter on the downwind at the midpoint. That becomes a reporting point. They do not call, in Canada, they do not call base. It's not necessarily wrong to call base, but it's not standard procedure to call the base leg. They certainly call the final leg. If you're entering airspace, Lake Gatineau radio, you can, from the south, you would be the red airplane. If you're out in the west, it's okay to enter on an extended downwind. From the north into Gatineau radio, you can enter on a base leg, and certainly a long final in the Gatineau radio. That is not recommended, perhaps not in the regulations, when entering an airport, an uncontrolled airport like Rockcliffe. So here we are entering that midpoint, midfield, overflying the field at Gatineau. We just say Gatineau radio, aircraft call sign, 1,200 feet over the field. Here we are turning that right downwind at the midpoint. And here we are turning base leg. Again, they don't necessarily announce base leg for, in this case, runway 27. And then we're turning final. So again, Gatineau radio, your aircraft call sign on final for runway 27. And Gatineau radio would just acknowledge, provide any kind of traffic, and you do not read back that traffic like we have done at the flight service stations. So we don't have the nearly amount of aircraft congestion, radio congestion that we have at flight service stations. Again, you do not read back what traffic they're calling out.